Great. So we've got a really exciting session this afternoon with speakers talking about how climate change is exacerbating conflicts and affecting faith communities, their freedom of religion and belief. But our speakers are also going to show us how interfaith collaboration can address the root causes of conflict and build climate resilience. This week is also the Global Week of Action for Peace and Climate Justice, where the climate movement seeks to build closer links with the peace movement in opposition to militarism and for real peace based on flourishing for people and for planet. I'll just post a link there so you can learn a bit more about the Global Week of Action. So today, we'll first be hearing from our three speakers who'll be talking about the relationship between climate conflict and freedom of religion and belief, with a focus on examples of interfaith collaborations, particularly in Sundarbans in South Asia, India, and Bangladesh, and Kenya, that build bridges and resilience. You'll then have a chance to ask them questions. And this will be a great opportunity for you to learn more about interfaith collaboration that your faith communities can take inspiration from. And we'll give you a chance to talk with each other about what you've heard. And we'll close with a sharing of your thoughts. So first, let me introduce our first speaker. We have Hanuman Das calling in from India, and Hanuman is the founder and CEO of GoDharmic, a volunteer organization for universal compassion and social action based on Dharmic principles. Hanuman will be speaking about GoDharmic's work in the Sundarbans in India. Thanks for being with us, Hanuman. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? Great.
Yep.
I'm currently in New Delhi, and I've just come back from the Himalayas up near the India, Tibet, and China borders. And I was really worried that, the internet wouldn't be good enough. So I'm really apologies if it does cut out. But it's lovely to be with you all. And thank you to Faith for the Climate for doing everything you do to bring us all together. I think, from GoDharmic's perspective, we've always really tried to prioritize work with Faith for the Climate, because I just think it's probably one of the most important initiatives and platforms for us to come together on. And the two words you use, peace and climate, I think are just so important. We are currently producing a book called Making Peace with Nature. And I think you covered those two words, peace and climate, are completely interlinked. And two of the areas, one where I've just visited recently, in the Himalayas, thousands of people are dying from landslides, boulders falling into villages, collapse of local infrastructure, cracks in the ground that are occurring, abnormal weather conditions, which is really causing huge climate impact on the local population, which is a low-income population. But really, the nature is extraordinarily beautiful. The people, they're very gentle, loving, very poor but happy. Almost, I would say, like a Himalayan Shangri-La, where I've been seeing the villages. The children are so happy with big smiles, but yet have little awareness about what's really happening around them and what's causing that, and what little impact they've caused towards doing that. And I think the same thing is in the Sundarbans, where we are working extensively to replant mangrove forests, help women develop skills that they can develop resilience and income for themselves to work. And I just think the challenges are so vast that we need everybody to come together to work on those plans together. I'm actually not going to be able to be on this call for very long because I have to step into another meeting after I share this, but I've asked Bhishma to join us, and he's actually on the line from the Sundarbans. And he's actually in the place, heading the center there, looking after 50 female workers who are replanting forests, who are all working together from different faith traditions, to kind of come together to replant the forest, which is 60% deforest. It's also the place of the Bengal tiger, huge biodiversity, one of the most biodiverse places on the planet, and absolutely beautiful. It's like many people will travel Kenya and consider the Masai Mara as like a kind of great place to visit. The Sundarbans is one of those kind of places with alligators and tigers and nature and so on. But yet when it cyclone hits, they're living waist high in water, no school, no ability to kind of find a living or work at all. Everything is shut. And they're all small remote islands that some of them take 4 to 5 hours by boat to get to. So they can't have the thing. And they decide to kind of stay there because they are Sundarbani people. It's their home. That's where they want to be. And we had a group of teachers from the UK come out recently. And one of them, the teacher, Poppy, she recorded a video and she was like, this has changed my life. Being here with these people who are living in absolute poverty, but so happy. They've taught me what happiness means to be in that situation and human resilience. And I think faith communities can bring that resilience. What we find is spiritually strong people can help get through the challenges that maybe we won't be able to help them with, getting the resources that they need to survive what's, going to be coming ahead. But can we give them resilience? Can we help them as much as possible? And this is one of the projects. We've currently planted 250,000 mangrove trees in that region with 50 female staff workers and a huge nursery that replants all of these things. But alongside that, we work on human trafficking reduction, because a lot of girls are being picked up from these regions and taken to big cities and forced into prostitution in the promise of jobs and all this. So I think when you talk about peace and climate action, the two are absolutely interlinked. And I guess I'll kind of, wanted to touch on two words that are really dear to the Hindu traditions and the Indian traditions, Sikh traditions, Buddhist traditions, Jain traditions, but are relevant for every single religion, every single believer or non-believer in any tradition. One is Dharma, and the word Dharma, if the Dharma of sugar is to be sweet, then we understand the Dharma of humanity is to be humane and to be kind and to be compassionate. And that should be the core of all of our traditions, that we can all come. I said that's common ground. I can see search for common ground. I think the common ground is compassion, kindness, and human friendship that we can develop and help people in need. And the second word that I would like to kind of share is, which I think is most important for our life and our work and what we need to do for climate action, is non-harming, non-violence, ahimsa, which Gandhi used to such good degree, Martin Luther King Jr. used to such good degree in civil rights movement. We need to use ahimsa in climate action movement and apply those principles to reduce harm, reduce animal agricultural impact, reduce all of the waste that we're causing and in every level. So I feel if we can, like the publication that we're producing next month is called Ahimsa, Making Peace with Nature. And that is something that we're trying to do with our advocacy and linking the advocacy work of non-harming with the climate action on the ground in places like the Sundarbans, where the problem is so vast that we can only cover certain small part of it. So we'll need the whole human family to be working to reduce harm in every direction. I don't want to take too much of your time. I know there's many wonderful and better speakers and people involved, but I just like to kind of extend deep appreciation for the work of Faith for the Climate and everyone who's contributing towards this forum, and also to say that please reach out to us at GoDharmic, because we want to work with you and we want to collaborate with everybody here to invite you to India, but also to work with you. We have an office in London, in Angel, in Islington, and we'd love to work with everyone who wants to collaborate on making peace with nature in any capacity. So I just say a big thank you so much to everybody. And
Oh,
thank you,
thanks
Ross.
a lot. Thank you, Hanuman, and thank you so much for calling in from India.
Bye-bye. We've got Bhishma on the line, Deborah Brutta, he's on the line. So if anybody has any questions, he knows better than me. I'm just a big mouth. He does all the work.
I'm sure that's not true. Thank you, Hanuman.
Thank
Yes,
you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Yeah, I think it's so important to be able to hear from communities most directly affected, um, and those who've done the least to cause the climate crisis. Um, we're now going to go over to Lizzie Nelson. Lizzie is the UK Director of Search for Common Ground, a peace building organisation that for over 40 years has been using innovative tools to end violent conflict around the world. And Lizzie is the co-author of a recent project, a recent report, Climate Change, Conflict and Freedom of Religion and Belief, which will frame the rest of our discussion here on climate as a conflict multiplier, but also how faith communities have been responding to that. Thank you for joining us, Lizzie.
Thanks so much, Roche. And I was also previously Director of Faith for the Climate. So it's a real joy to be back with you all. I feel like I'm among friends. So hello, everyone. Thank you for having me back. I thought I'd say a couple of words before we get into the slides, which are more about the report that Roche just mentioned. First of all, to say something about Search for Common Ground. Like, what is a peace building organization? Because when I first started working for them, I thought, what's peace building? Like, really, what does that mean? And the simplest way of saying it, Search for Common Ground works in 40 countries around the world, and all of our teams are made up of the people, local people. It's not kind of Westerners in those countries, it's very much people from the community and reflecting the ethnic and religious makeup of the country that they're working in. And if you think of Search for Common Ground, we're a bit like a development organization, but everything we do is always about trying to build peace. So that could be working with the police to encourage them to communicate better with the local community and to understand them better. It could be working across religious communities. It could be working to empower women to stand for election. We do an awful lot of things, but everything we do in all the countries we work in is about trying to build more peaceful, more cohesive societies. The other little kind of thing I wanted to say before we get into the slides is that we're being funded quite a lot now at the moment to work on freedom of religion and belief. And again, when I first heard about it, I was like, what? What's that? And the simplest way of talking about that is really, it's just a freedom of religion and belief is a human right. It's there in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's Article 18, and it's the right to hold a religious belief or not, to also to express that belief, to worship or to express your faith verbally in any way. It's also the right to change religion. And as you can imagine, in many countries around the world, this human right is at risk and is at threat because it could be that there's religious conflict. It could be that in contexts where minorities are being persecuted. So in some countries around the world, you can be killed simply for the belief that you hold, for expressing that belief, for belonging to a belief community. In some countries, it's not as bad as being killed, but it could be persecution, discrimination, economic discrimination. There's so many different ways in which people's right to express their religious identity is at threat around the world. And Search for Common Ground is being funded to work to try and improve the access to that human right, which is a right for everybody, whatever our background, whatever our belief. So, what led to this report that I'm going to speak about today? We were funded by the Dutch government to work in 7 countries for 5 years on freedom of religion and belief. And the thing that struck us was that in 2 of the 7 countries, we were working with partners, local partners, and international partners in all of the 7 countries. And in 2 of the 7 countries, Indonesia and Kenya, our partners chose to work on environmental and climate issues as a route to improving freedom of religion and belief. And we were really struck by this. We were like, gosh, that's interesting. It's a freedom of religion and belief program, but people are choosing to work on climate issues because that improves freedom of religion and belief. So we thought, okay, there's something really interesting to explore here. What's going on? So that's the genesis of the report that I'm going to share with you now. And I'm so glad that you've heard from Hanuman because he's one of his organization working with Deba Brata in India is one of the case studies in the report. And Judy, my colleague, who's country director in Kenya and 2 other countries, will speak to us about the work that Search is doing in Kenya straight after me. So I won't duplicate anything that they have to tell you because they will tell you far more than I can, but I'll just give you some of the information in the background about this report. So Roche, if we could start the slides now, that would be great. Thank you. Great. So if we could go to the first slide. So when we started looking into this, what became very clear from the research is that climate change, armed conflict, and atrocities are interlinked and reinforcing. The United Nations Environment Programme has found that natural resource conflicts are at the heart of over 40% of internal armed conflicts, so civil wars that have been happening in the past 30 years. And Stanford University has done a study which shows that climate change has contributed significantly to the armed conflict risk in the world over the last century, and this will likely increase dramatically. So I think from a conflict point of view, climate change is best understood as a stress multiplier. In fragile contexts, it's leading to increased conflict over access to natural resources and increased migration, which in turn is raising the risk of climate-aggravated religious persecution. Next slide, please, Rosh. And in contexts where, oh, sorry, Deborah Barata, would you mind muting? I think we're getting a little bit of feedback from your end. So in some countries and contexts where there's already deep religious divides and a history of religious violence and persecution,
I'll give you the ID.
Sorry, Mohammed, could you remain muted, please?
I've muted him,
Thank
you. Thank you. So we see, so for example, what we're seeing in the Sahel and the Great Lakes region in Africa is that violent conflicts have erupted in recent years. And with desertification, which is caused by climate change, you're seeing traditional pastoralist herder communities who in the past had generally quite peaceful relationships with agriculturalists. The pressure on land with the increase of the Sahara Desert is leading to herder communities coming into conflict over land with settled agricultural communities. And due to historical reasons and the impact of colonialism and these kinds of things, traditionally the herder communities have been Muslim, and the settled pastoralist agriculture communities are Christian. And the conflicts that are happening now, triggered by climate change, are not about religion, but because of the background of religious violence that's happened in many of these contexts, it's re-triggering unaddressed trauma of explicit division and violence in the country, alongside and also going on at the same time, this huge increase that we're seeing globally in misinformation and hate speech online, where people are attributing violence to religion, even if it's, or blaming people on violence on religious conflict when it's not always about religion at all, but leading to violence based on religion. So there's an imperative need to address both climate and religious persecution through integrated programming in Nigeria's Middle Belt and other places as part of a broader holistic response to the overlapping crises and to prevent climate-aggravated religious persecution. If we could go to the next slide, please, Rosh. So just to mention that in addition to places where we're seeing religious violence triggered by climate change, there are people for whom their religion is integrally linked to their being in the land. And just to mention one of these communities, the Mandaeans in Iraq, they practice their entire religion through baptism, and not just once, like in the Christian religion, but on a very regular basis. And these rivers are drying up. So some of the their actual ability to practice their faith is being compromised because of climate change. And in addition to this, traditional and indigenous religions are often deeply linked into the ecosystem, knowing well how to manage those ecosystems, but their voices are rarely heard in climate adaptation and policy making at the national and international levels. Next slide, please, Rosh. And I wanted to mention this because I think it's deeply important, even if it's not at the core of the report, that women and girls are at specific risk of religious persecution triggered by the impact of climate change. So when women and girls are forced to move with their families to migrate because of conflict, because of natural resource pressures, when they're in refugee camps or on the move, women and girls from minority religious communities in their context are particularly at risk of sexual violence, basically. and targeted because of their religious minority status. So this is something that a new Open Doors report has found, but I think it's really, and it would apply to all religious minority women wherever they are in the world. Minorities are targeted, and women and girls particularly are targeted with sexual violence. So I wanted to mention this as a particular vulnerability that women and girls are facing in these contexts. Next slide, please, Rish. So finding the solutions. You all at Faith for the Climate know this because it's at the heart of the work that you do through Faith for the Climate and in your communities. Faith communities recognise a shared religious imperative to care for the earth. And as we all know, this can be a very strong foundation for joint climate action. Globally, climate change and environmental degradation are impacting people of every faith. It hurts all of us, and faiths share both the common concern and the common ground in their commitments to protecting the earth. This is something you know, but it's so important to reiterate it because not everyone does get this. So please move on to the next slide, please, Roche. So in terms of finding the solutions, we looked at 4 countries for case studies where interfaith climate action is having a positive impact, and both on the climate and on the environmental impact of climate, and on the relationship between the communities where those relationships are already under stress. I'm not going to go through these in detail because I want to leave plenty of time for Judy to speak and for Deborah Brata if he wants to come in. You've heard from Hanuman already, but one of our case studies was GoDharmic's work in the Sundarbans. Next slide, please, Roche. Another country we looked at was Indonesia, where Eco-Bhinneka are working across faiths on environmental action in order to bring about better respect between those communities. We could move on, please, Roche. Kenya is where Search for Common Ground is one of the key partners and working with the Kaya community in the Kaya forest. Judy will tell you more about that, so I'm not going to steal her thunder. Move straight on, please, Roche. And the 4th case study in the report, which I personally found very moving, was speaking to the Arava Institute in Israel. The Arava Institute works in Israel, in Palestine, in the West Bank, Gaza, and in Jordan. And one of the things that I found very inspiring speaking to them was that even after everything that's happened since the 7th of October, the partnerships that they've created through joint climate action have remained strong. And I think this is it's a very strong testament to the trust and respect that joint climate action can build, that can withstand even the pressure of the horrible violence and conflict that we're seeing in the Middle East right now. So I'd encourage you to read the report. Roche has put the link into the chat so that you can read more about Arava's work. So those are the 4 case studies. And at the international level, Iyad Abu Mogli, who a lot of you know, works at the UN. He's been very supportive of this report. He helped me in the writing of it and in thinking about it. And he really wanted both to support the findings of this report, but also to stress again the role that Indigenous communities have to play with the expertise that they bring about the land that they live in. And that he sees one of his core roles at the UN in uplifting their voices, bringing them to the table to speak directly to decision makers, policy makers and funders about what their communities need. So I just wanted to say a thanks to Iyad at this point for his support for this work. And then there's 5 key recommendations in our report. I won't go through them all, but the most important one that I think stood out for me was, and I heard from lots of people, was the need for integration between programming on freedom of religion and belief and the funding that there is for that kind of work and climate programming. So when we're thinking about adaptation and mitigation climate programs to do these things, we should be thinking about the religious impact of that and how you can exacerbate conflicts if you don't take care to, if you give all the money to one community for adaptation programming and leave out some minority communities, that can exacerbate conflict. So we need to think about religious sensitivity in the way that climate programming and mitigation is done. And similarly, we need to think about the potential of climate action to deliver for the freedom of religion and belief outcomes. And when we bring these 2 things together, we can really have a great synergy and deliver both better climate outcomes and better outcomes in terms of freedom of religion and belief, and reduce persecution and reduce, therefore, the conflict and atrocities that climate change is causing. I'll stop there. very happy to answer further questions later on. But I'd love to hand over now to Judy, who's able to speak to us from Kenya today about the work of Search for Common Ground. Thank you, Roche, everybody, and Judy.
Thanks so much, Lizzie. I think this report is really important, and for me, it kind of fleshed out how climate is multiplying bad effects around the world, and it's really highlighting how the people who have done the least to cause the problem are having more problems heaped upon them by the emissions in the rich world. And a way to put that right is something that we here in this room are good at doing, is collaboration and interfaith cooperation. And that's a real solution that we can use to tackle climate and interfaith conflict. So yes, I would now like to introduce Judy. And Judy, as Lizzie said, is involved with the project in the Kaya Forest in Kenya. She is the country director for Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia for Search for Common Ground, and she's going to be speaking to us a bit more about the amazing work happening in the Kaya Forest. Thank you for joining us, Judy.
Thank you, Lizzie, for taking us through the slides. Again, thank you, Roche, for hosting, and thank you for all of us who managed to come into this space. A very good afternoon here from Mombasa, and using the local language, Jambo. It might not be very new, Jambo. It's found in very many songs and greetings and some of the movies. So I'm happy to engage with you. So I'll quickly take us to Kaya Forest. So we have several Kayas, and Kayas mean home. In the local language, it means home. We have had a community that is made up of 9 subgroups, and each of those subgroups have important forest areas where they conducted their prayers. Now, these forest areas are along the Kenya's coastal line, bordering the Indian Ocean. Some of the forests are right along the ocean front, and other forests are further in because the community was also spread inland for quite a bit. The Kaya becomes a home because that's where the communities decided to live, but also because that is where they got their inspirational spirit dwelling. And near the place where their spirit dwells, they had water, access to water, they had food, and they had a whole way of life going in. So over time, the forest ecosystem has been fractured. It would connect all the way from Somalia, come down to the Kenya's coast, and go to Tanzania. But with time, the forests have been fractured. They're no longer connected. With time, population has increased, and therefore encroachment has happened. With time, urban communities have come up, and therefore the pressures of urban communities living next to forests has also come up. But also with the increase of populations and movement of people, and also new religions coming in, we have had Kayas almost being taken to the back burner. And some of the threats that the Kayas face, one is recognition. So some of the Kayas have their elders under very high risk of getting killed. So where we have elderly killings, or what people call burn the witch, has been experienced in some of our Kaya places. And we are having conversations to promote their recognition, their protection, and honoring their dignity. But today I want to focus on the Kayas that are right in the middle of modernization, Kayas that are surrounded by a very touristy community by people who have invested in very big tourism enterprises. And at the back of their enterprises, we have a big forest, which has been under threat, which is the Diani forest, which is what I want to work on today. So Diani forest is what we call a coral rag forest. Coral rag forest means that one time in history, that forest land was underwater. But now the seas receded and the forests came up, and therefore we have the coral rag forests right across our ecosystem. We've got about 4 of them, 4 very nice coral rags, which is about 500 meters to 1 kilometer to the ocean front. These forests have got a canopy of about 35 meters. This particular forest has got about 20 indigenous trees, very, very big trees that you cannot go around. You saw the picture that was shared in the presentation. We have got that kind of trees in the forest that you can take about 5-6 people to circle to go around its girth. We have over 20 animal species, not counting all of them one by one, but we have the Sykes monkeys, we have the Columbus monkeys, we have impalas, and we have the wild pigs, among many others, including the birds. I'm sorry, I didn't get to get the bird watchers list of birds in here, but we've got lots of birds in that particular forest. The forest is currently recognized by the government as a national heritage site because of its cultural and religious value, and because it's recognized as a place of worship for the Mijikenda. And therefore the National Museums has a stake in it. The Kenya Forest Service also is an owner of that forest because it's a government recognized forest. It's a community reserve forest, and therefore the National Kenya Forest Service has got mandates over it. The county government also has mandates because it's a community forest. But what's shocking is that the land has already been grabbed and allocated title deeds. And what we have noticed is that a few kayas next door have already been grabbed and fenced off, and there's been quite a lot of fight between the elders and the private companies that have fenced off and walled them off. Sometimes it has been fatal, trying to get access to go back and pray inside their site. So what are we looking at in Diani? We're looking at the pressures of people who want to build new hotels, want to build new villas, want to open up resorts, ocean resorts, having great interest in that land. We also have a golf course that has managed to cut off part of that forest and has created a golf area because it's in a very, very prime land. So what we stand to lose, we stand, if the elders had not held their feet on the ground, if the elders had not battled the grabbers and they used their own ways. So there's some people who came and built homes inside the forest, and the elders were able to pray, and the homes crumbled. So if the elders had not held their ground through their spiritual prayers or rituals, most of this land would have been taken away. Why is this land important? This land becomes an important place because that's where the leaders of the society are coronated. It is also important because when there is drought, when there is long farming, long periods of no rain, the women come together and go to their shrine. The women have their own space where they go pray, where they go dance, where they go offer sacrifices. And before they leave the forest, the rain falls. The forest is also an important area because it also serves as a reservoir. It has got wells that spring up from the same. And some of these wells are considered to be wells that provide healing elements. The trees of that forest also provide us with herbs. But because of the work the elders have done, they created enemies and friends in equal measure. So what we have done over time is that we have strengthened the interfaith conversation between the Kaya elders who have been many times gone unrecognized, many times been criminalized as bringing backward traditions or bringing backward worship into the community. They've been vilified many times. So what we did is that we began with dialogues, interfaith dialogues outside of the forest. So we got all the faith leaders and actors who live in that community to have meetings. So we did 3-4 meetings. They were able to have the same space. They were able to understand that every one of them has got the right to worship, the right to access their places of worship. And we agreed to move to their places of worship. And for the very first time, we're able to bring Christian leaders into the Kaya forest. We're able to bring Muslim leaders into the Kaya forest. We're able to bring, within the Christian community, you know that we'd have the Protestants, we have the Catholics, and we have the evangelicals. They came, but of course, we had a common agreement that we can't take photos. We cannot share images of those leaders inside that place, because it would have a backlash with their communities. What are the Christian leaders doing in a shrine? What are they doing in such a space? But when they came to that meeting, by the end of the meeting, they were ready to take photos themselves, because they realized it is a very beautiful place, very cool place. Mombasa is very hot. If you leave that Kaya, 3 minutes later, you'll be sweating. But when you come into that Kaya, it's very beautiful, very cool. There are animals. So whatever they had as perceptions of a dark space, they came and found life. And they were among the proponents of encouraging that they need to bring their children, even to come and see the trees, even if not for anything, just to come and see the ecosystem, the diversity, and to help their children appreciate the value of forests. So we got friends from the religious leaders and we got friends from the religious actors. But most importantly is that we now have the recognition of the Kaya elders within that community as important leaders. At first, they would not be put at the core of a meeting, but now more increasingly, the private sector has got an alliance, has got an association, has started now involving them in their activities. They're also now beginning to earn money from presenting their songs and dances in those touristy places. The recognition is going up, but also the community ownership, the social ownership of the Kayas is improving. The social perception of the shrines is improving. But what are we dealing with? We are still dealing with the huge push for logging, for those who want to make charcoal. We are still pushing with people who want to grab the land. And we are also dealing with people who want to open up mines. So some of these Kayas along the coastal shores have got very important minerals that have been discovered over time, including titanium and very other important rare minerals. So there's the push to have those forests opened up. And when you ask some of our actors, what's more important? Is prayer more important than economy? So that's the conversation that we're having. Is a religious right equal to an economic right? So of course, that needs further conversation so that we can have a place where there's a common agreement that religious and freedom of religion and belief is a right equal to an economic right of that society. The other thing that has happened that also we need to begin to unpack is that when we make laws to come and protect forests, we also need to remember that there were guardians of that forest. So we made laws in 2000 and about 15 years ago, we made forest laws and created community associations that would manage the forests near them. So what the law did, we borrowed a law from Indonesia that creates user groups. So we have forest user groups who could be people who gather herbs, people who want to collect timber, people who want to do any forest enterprise. They form community user associations and they need to get permission to get into the forest. So what that law has done, it has minimized the role of the forest guardians, the Kaya leaders, who are the original owners of the forest, and put them in a small user group. So there's conflict right there, because they're saying, hey, why should we ask for permission to go and pray in our shrine? Why should we write letters 2-3 days, 1 week in advance for us to go and pray? So the conversation we're having right now is that on top of the laws that have been put to protect the forest, is that there are limitations again, because the custodians of the forest now have to come back again into a newly created structure, fit in there as a corner group and seek access always. And that is where the problem comes, because the ones who sit at the top of that structure can very easily give concessions to mining. And mining will easily take away most of the indigenous trees, will take away the trees that grow on the shrine. And their religion is based on old big trees. So if, for example, the mine is to be opened where their worship happens, it means that there are trees that are more than 500 years go away. So those are the conversations we continue to hold. Conversations on expanding belief and religion, but also understanding the push of modernity and the push for development, and having a common ground on the same.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, thank you so much for calling in from Mombasa and making it clear how so much of these issues are around land and ownership and governance. And especially, I think it's really important for us in the global, what gets called the global north, to understand how disproportionate effects are worsening conditions in already fragile ecosystems and complicating local contexts around the world. I don't know, I think it's great that we have such an international call, and I don't know if Deborah Bratt is still on the call and would be able to talk a little about the Sundarbans project. Would that be okay?
Yes, am I audible?
Hi, we can hear you.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us. In Sundarban, currently last few hours, I mean for last few years, we are continuing working with the local community. So I really thank you for the climate team for inviting us in this beautiful session. So just few things I want to share with you here in Sundarban. So many people, like, they are belong from Muslim communities, Christian communities, as well as some other communities. So in Sundarban area, so they are together with planting mangroves in the coastal area of the Sundarban area, as well as they help us to planting mangroves in the river embankment side. And through this initiative, we sustain more than 1,000 of community members their livelihood, as well as we hire more than 50 permanent volunteers from the coastal area. And through that environmental initiative, we sustain the livelihood in Hindu, Muslim, and as well as the Christian. So we try to prevent the discrimination of the class and caste through this environmental initiative. And throughout the year, we are currently working on that. And it is our dharma. We call this initiative that is Dharma Forest. So it is our dharma to protect Mother Earth and Mother Nature. So I believe Mother Earth and Mother Nature bring us common ground, and these ground together will sustain the livelihood across the nation, beyond the caste and beyond the religious, across the world. Yeah, thank you all, and maybe next time in the coming week, maybe our team will present a good, beautiful lecture with the help of the PPT presentation, and there we will show how we work in the coastal part of the Sundarban and what kind of work we are doing so much, and how they and their story we will share. As Ali Hanuman Bhai already mentioned, so many challenges in Sundarban area because the human trafficking and the child marriage are one of the burning issues in Sundarban area. So we are also working on that. So we request all of you touch with the Faith for Climate, and the coming week We will share all beautiful our work and activities share with you. We need all of you, and together we will make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, and it's so good to hear and have faith communities from different parts of the world here who are taking on climate impacts through their faith principles, as you talk about your Dharmic principles, and working in an interfaith way. I thought it was really important just to hear from the speakers we have, and now we'd like to hear from you. Did you have any questions for our speakers here? Unfortunately, Hanuman had to go, but we still have Lizzie and Judy here. If I could just have the privilege of asking the first question in terms of what can UK faith communities do to support these projects we've heard about? What would be the best way for us to support your work?
Yeah. So in GoDharmic, since 2019, we have a now more than 500 youth communities, and in the Sundarban area, in different block area, there is a multiple village in Sundarban, and all our villages are isolated by the river network system. So here, the few children, they are under age of 10, they are drop out in the Sundarban area. So we provide the pre-education and post-education, as well as reduce the dropout rate, and also we help them and also provide the training how to plant mangroves in their local community area, and through that way how they sustain their livelihood, and how the environment activity reduce the literacy rate. Increase the literacy rate of the coastal area, and reduce the dropout rate of the village area. So through that initiative and through environment and education is our main objective. And as you know, this mango plantation will cover more than 8 SDG goals across the nation. So we are working on that.
Thank you, Deborah. Lizzie, would you like to talk a bit about how UK faith communities can support the work of the Search for Common Ground projects?
Thank you, Roche. Yeah, so I think one of the most important things we can do as organisations in the UK is simply to talk about the work that's happening around the world, because sometimes when we hear about how overwhelming the impact of the climate crisis is, it's very easy to both fall into despair and kind of a sense of, there's nothing that we can do because these impacts are now out of everyone's control. But also to portray the rest of the world as victims of climate change rather than actors in solving the problem of climate change. And I think the work that Judy has shared, that Search is doing in Kenya, and the work that Deborah has just been speaking about in the Sundarbans in West Bengal, this is where the solution lies. It's at the local level, people coming together to change the environment and to work on both the climate impacts and the conflicts that exist around them in their communities. And that's where the investment needs to go. So by speaking about the impact of this work, we need to be saying to both that this is possible, solutions are possible, but also demanding that our governments in the West fund and support the kind of work that Judy is speaking about, the kind of work that Deborah is speaking about. The UK has cut its ODA budget enormously, and so far our Labour government hasn't yet said that they're going to increase the ODA budget because of all the economic pressures. But when we get back to 0.7, these are the kind of projects that we should be investing in, that our governments and the UN and the World Bank and other governments, and encouraging the governments that they interact with, the government of Kenya, the government of India, to invest in interfaith integrated climate programming. So I think this is the kind of advocacy that we can do in the West to support what our brothers and sisters are doing all around the world. That would be my biggest ask. You could also donate to GoDharmic, you can donate to Search for Common Ground, but it's probably our voices and the power that we have in our voices that is the most important thing people can do.
Thank you, Lizzie. Unfortunately, our time is running on, and I want to give you all a chance to talk with each other about what you've heard today. So I'd like to give you a chance to speak in smaller groups, and I'll give you a few prompt questions to aid your conversation. But obviously, feel free to talk about anything that has come to mind from what you've heard. Please introduce yourselves. It's a very international call, so I think there'll be lots of different contexts that people can learn from. And then afterwards, we'd love to hear what you discussed. You're free to not join the breakouts if you don't want to. You're happy to stay in the main room, and we can discuss that as well. I'll post some questions now, and I will assign people to some breakout rooms, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you talk about. So you should be going to breakout rooms now. Let me know if you have any issues. Judy and Lizzie, I didn't know if you wanted to join as well, so I've just kept you here in the main room.
I'm happy. I think Judy and I, if you put us into 2 different rooms, Roche, and maybe a different room from Deborah Barata,
Okay.
then we can also join in the conversations that are happening.
Okay, I will do that now.
And maybe good also to tell people how long we have in the room.
I'll post
in
a
the chat.
I'll
Yeah,
do a post.
so we know how long we have to talk.
Yeah. Okay, I'll put you into room 4, Lizzie.
Brilliant.
And I joined room 3.
Yes, you should be able to.
Yes. There's my colleague Mariam
Ah, okay.
Ayoti.
Would you like to go in that one?
Mariam, how many rooms do we have?
There are 4.
Okay, you could add her to another one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think she's in a different room. She got an invitation to a different room. Hi, Mohammed. I just saw your message.
Yes.
I can say the best way to connect is if I put my email chat, and then feel free to email me.
Hello, are we allowed to talk?
Sure, I can talk.
Oh, fine. I'm Mohammed Ibrahim.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, sir. I've learned a lot from the meeting today. I'm Mohammed Ibrahim from Garissa County. On matters regarding to climate change and the land restoration, I have worked with a project that has concluded recently. It's called Kenya Response Integration Development Plan, Dr. Deep, that was supported by World Bank. As you know, in my county, Garissa, we are hosting a good number of the refugees. That is the Dadaab refugee camp, whereby those refugees, where they settle, they have destroyed the lands, and they have anyhow cut down all the trees that making environment beauty. That's Garissa County. From there, we have been supporting, we are working with that project to do a land restoration, whereby we are planting a good number of trees, and we come up an initiative called Cut 1, Replace 3. Cut 1, Replace 3. That was an initiative that we used to drive in a Dadaab refugee camp, part of Garissa County. Thank you for your support. I've had a lot today here, and I want us to engage more than this so that we learn each other. Thank you. I'm grateful to be here.
Thanks, Mohammed, and thanks for telling me about the project in Garissa. Unfortunately, the organization that I work for that was running this webinar, Faith for the Climate, is UK based, and our work is just in the UK. But I'd be very happy to promote your work if you want to email me in the email I've put in the chat. Okay. Mohammed, I was just saying, feel free to email me. I put my email in the chat, and I will be emailing the participants after this. So feel free to email me about your work. But Faith for the Climate, who I work for and who run this, we're running this webinar, we only work in the UK. So the support we can offer is limited. Sorry, Mohammed, I can't hear you if you're speaking to me.
Hello. I wanted to ask, do you support the organizations that support the land restoration in Kenya or in Africa?
I wouldn't say I know enough about that to give an opinion.
Oh, or pardon?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Or I ask you, do you support the organizations? Do you support the organizations that are doing the land restoration or that are promoting environmental stability in Africa and Kenya at large?
We support organizations in general, in principle, but the work that we do is based in the UK. But obviously, we fully endorse anyone doing land restoration or ecosystem restoration work. But our focus is strictly in the UK.
Okay, research in UK. Thank you. Thank you. I understand.
No problem. Welcome back, everyone, if you are returning. Welcome back. If you are returning. Welcome back, everyone. I think people are still coming back. Great. People are coming back now. I hope you were able to have some discussion in the time you had. I'd love to hear what you talked about and what you'd had thought from what our speakers were talked about today. Would anyone be willing to offer some of what you talked about? Don't be shy. Lizzie, since you're the only person I can see on my screen, would you be up for telling us a little about what you talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. Oscar it was in our group, but he's having some problems with the sound. Like I hear it, I don't think he can hear very clearly what we're saying. But Oscar shared about the work of Quaker peace initiatives in Kenya, and said that he'd very much like to connect with Judy. So I don't know if we can, if you unmute Oscar, maybe he'll be able to speak a little bit about their work. But I don't. We'd have to ask him in the chat if he's happy to just.
Yes, thank you, Lizzie Nelson, once again. And thank you, Roche, as well as Judy Kimamo, who extended this invitation through the country team in Kenya to see us participate in this process. And I think in our breakout session, I was just drawing the reflection of the realities on what is existing between drawing the examples from, of course, what you had mentioned in my end. There's this specific location where we were taken through the slides of those communities that are practicing their religion practice through baptism by rivers, and trying to draw also with the intersection of what's here in Kenya of the many religious groups that also use the same particular practice, and they're drawn from the different parts of the country. And it's a great concern because it comes to a point where now it also just paints the picture of what really is ahead if we are not putting in the rightful measures and mitigating this particular angle. And then also on the freedoms that are associated with practicing these beliefs, the tolerance that is also allowed, this space of religious practice. It's a major concern that I had shared with the team together with Lizzie, and it's an entire relation that I think is shared across, and also the examples that were given from the Kaya structures in the coastal region in Kenya. So it's a whole sector of what can really be drawn together to have an ideal existence, and also just borrowing from what the Quaker Peace Initiatives is trying to draw in terms of developing programs that champion for climate mitigation and climate responsive actions. Thank you for the time once again, and that will be the submission.
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you so much for calling in from Kenya and telling us about your local context. Did anyone else want to offer what they were discussing with others in their breakout room? I'm not sure who was in the different rooms. Judy, were you in the room with Lizzie? Are you still online, Judy, and be able to talk a bit about what you were discussing within your breakout room?
So we were in breakout room 3, and I was speaking to Okunande, who is in Baku State, Nigeria, who is a doctoral student, who's also connected to the work that we are doing in Nigeria, and he participated in the presentation of the report findings over there. So he spoke about many things, what we see, what does he see on his end, and he gave me an interesting small snippet of some of the issues that might look different, but I connected it also as a climate change issue. So he was telling me that on Fridays, when prayer time happens, people pour into the streets, into the highways, and they will pray from the roads. So what it does, it creates a huge traffic snarl up, and I was reflecting on that as the amount of fuel that then we have to burn as people try to maneuver the various prayer points along the highway. But then our conclusion of that is that we need to have conversations where the rights and freedoms of one entity do not limit or override the rights and freedoms of the other group. So that was the conversations we had about what we are seeing, but also what he saw playing out in his community.
Great, thank you, Judy.
So emissions go up on Friday. Carbon emissions go up on Friday.
Yeah. It's great to hear about all these different local contexts. This has definitely been our most international call ever. And thank you for your contributions, Lizzie, Oscar, Judy, Hanuman, Deborah. That brings us to the end of today's gathering, and I hope you feel encouraged and equipped to build bridges with other faith communities where you live, and especially on projects of eco-restoration. As we can see, climate destabilization and conflict are unfortunately two sides of the same coin, and we cannot solve one without the other. We at Faith for the Climate will continue to join the dots between an economic system driven by profit, the loss of wild places, the imperiling of communities on the climate frontline. And as part of this, we are continuing to run workshops on what climate justice means particularly from a faith perspective, as well as joining campaigns to make polluters pay for the climate destabilization we're all experiencing, and pushing for a just outcome at the COP talks that are coming up in November. If you'd like to keep up to date with that work and from the organizations you've heard from today, I'll post some links in the chat now, which will allow you to stay in touch with the work you've heard about. I'll just do that now. And please stay in touch. Please subscribe to our e-news, and we'll keep you up to date with any campaigns that are going to be happening from now until the end of the year. Which just leaves me to say thank you again for coming, and to our amazing speakers, Hanuman, Lizzie, and Judy. And thank you for all being open and present and hopeful. And I hope you leave feeling like you are feeling equipped to be able to take on the challenges ahead of us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Roche. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Look forward to being on calls with you all again.
Indeed. Keep well.
You too.
Thank you.
And
Take
let's
care.
get grounded. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.